I'm a huge fan right now of 6K sensors. There's something about a 6K sensor that just seems a bit perfect. I think 8K is just too much, which is what my Sony a7R5 is doing. So I've lately been shooting a lot with the LUMIX S52X and also the LUMIX S9, because I've really enjoyed having 6K, especially with it being able to shoot in open gate and anamorphic D-squeeze. But this came out recently and I got my hands to mess with it. This is the Nikon Z6 Mark III, and overall, I've really enjoyed this camera, especially when it comes to the image quality of the Nikon Z6iii. It's particularly special, so I thought it would be interesting to compare my LUMIX S52X to the Nikon Z6 Mark III and see which one is more beneficial to me, because even though they are both more or less the same in terms of price, roughly $2,500, and also the same size sensor with it being 6K, but they are also pretty different in the features that they offer. So while I've been out here on this horse ranch kind of messing around with both of these cameras, one of the first things I noticed is just how gosh darn good that LUMIX stabilization is. I really do think it's second to none. I think that this camera in particular, it's just so smooth. It's so easy to get handheld shots. I never even think about it when I'm using it. I just turn it on and go. And it even works really well when you use anamorphic lenses, because they have anamorphic specific stabilization, which is really great. Compare that to the S52X, I would say that the stabilization in this is decent. Now, I did have a lot of people in the comments of my last video say that you didn't test it, the stabilization's really great, but when I was talking to them, it felt like they were more on the photography side and I'm much more on the video side, so that's more what I was comparing. I will say the stabilization for photography, no complaints, it works perfectly fine, but when I was using it for video, even out here, it's noticeably worse. Now, as of recording this, I have not put the footage between these two cameras side by side, but I will say that immediately I noticed that the Nikon Z6iii footage quality is far superior to the S52X. Of course, that's going to be because this is shooting 6K 60 and RAW internal, which is 12-bit, compared to this, which also can shoot 6K, but it's up to 30 frames per second and it's limited to 420 10-bit, which is fine for what I'm doing in YouTube, but I will say that, again, it's noticeably lower quality, and that's without even having put it into my editor. Now, when it comes to autofocus between these two cameras, I would say that I would give a slight edge to the LUMIX. Personally, I found that the Nikon was really struggling to figure out where the eye of the horse is. For some reason, I kept wanting to focus on the ears of the horse, whereas the LUMIX seems to perform just fine in this little field test. I don't think that either of these are contenders for the best when it comes to autofocus. I think that goes to Sony or Canon, but both were decent enough to work for this. Now, one thing worth talking about with these two cameras is definitely going to be the overall build quality. While I enjoy how my S52X looks, especially with that blacked out design, I've been a big fan of this, but I will say that the quality of this camera does feel substantially lower than the I get all these camera names mixed up, but then the Z6 Mark III. This grip feels incredible. The switches on this feel really good. The dials feel really good. I did talk about how much I dislike this back D-pad, so I won't get into that again in this video. I won't rant about it for 3 more minutes. But the overall build quality of this, while it's plenty fine, it's just, I don't know, a little bit lower. Although they did give you a scroll wheel here on the back, so really dig that. So now that I'm back home, I wanted to go ahead and take a look at the footage in DaVinci Resolve to see the actual results, because it's one thing to just get a feeling for it while you're out in the field filming, and then it's another thing to see what kind of footage these two cameras can produce when you actually start to play with it. And by the way, this little side angle that we got going on right here is filmed with my Hohem iSteady M7 phone gimbal, and I have it actually tracking me, so as I move around in my seat, it's going to make sure that I'm always framed and composed, and I'm able to do that because it has this little removable remote screen, which is pretty awesome. So not only was I able to go ahead and select myself for tracking, but I was also able to compose it and hit record all remotely, so that I didn't have to get up out of my chair to go ahead and start the recording once I had the tracking going, which is pretty great. If you're looking at this side angle at any point in this video, just know that it's being filmed with this Hohem iSteady M7 phone gimbal. I talked about it a lot in my last Nikon video, so if you want to go see me talk about it even more, talk about some really cool features that are pretty unique to this phone gimbal specifically. I don't think I've seen any of these features on any other phone gimbal. It's definitely the most feature complete phone gimbal that personally I've ever used. So go check out that other Nikon video if you want to check out even more about the iSteady M7. It's pretty great. So I went ahead and loaded all the footage up into DaVinci Resolve. So you can see this is my timeline here. The orange footage is going to be all of my Nikon 12-bit RAW files. The teal footage is going to be the 10-bit log from Nikon. Pink is going to be all of my 6K OpenGate 420 footage from the LUMIX. And then green is going to be 4K 60 422 10-bit from the LUMIX. So when you're kind of looking through the log images, you can't really tell a difference. So I went ahead and made a color correction. And here, when you're looking through the footage, I will say that the Nikon footage immediately seems more color rich, but I haven't really done too much in terms of playing around compared to my LUMIX footage, although I do love how easy it is to work with the LUMIX footage. For me, for some reason, the vlog out of these LUMIX cameras is just really simple to work with, much easier than Sony and in this case Nikon. But that being said, because it's 420, it's a lot more limited. So if you just kind of scroll through here, there's not really too much to note. I think that the 422 10-bit on the LUMIX looks really good, and it's directly comparable to the Nikon 422 10-bit footage as well. Although because the Nikon has a much better processor, it is actually shooting 6K 422 10-bit at 60 frames per second, whereas with my LUMIX, I am limited to either 420 10-bit in 6K or again 422 10-bit in 4K. However, something that I really didn't go into too much detail on my last Nikon Z6iii video is that the footage is definitely a bit noisy. So if I zoom in here and you're looking at the shadows of this horse, it's noisy for sure. I talked to Cam Mackey about this and he really likes his LUMIX Z6 Mark III. I was like, hey, what's going on with this? And he said that that's just something he's noticed as well, and it actually almost messed up a shoot that he was doing. That being said, if you film a little bit overexposed, you're gonna get much less of that issue once you bring all your footage down. So here, this is filmed much more appropriately. There might still be just a little bit of noise, but really clean if you go ahead and shoot overexposed when shooting in Nikon log. That being said, you can apply a bit of noise reduction. So I did that here, and you can see that that noise does go away. This is an M1 Max, so it's definitely a little bit older of a computer nowadays, but it was top of the line at the time. It chugs my computer, so if I hit play, you can see that it's playing at 4.5 frames. It's really slow compared to what it should be doing when you don't have it on. So if you're working with Nikon RAW footage, I would highly recommend obviously color grading at the very end once your timeline is locked and everything is good. But not only that, definitely overexpose your Nikon footage even more than maybe you think. As long as your highlights aren't clipping, keep it really overexposed, then bring it all back down so that your shadows are much cleaner. It's not necessarily an issue, it's just something to know with the Z6 when you're filming with it. All that being said, the LUMIX S52X is also capable of filming in ProRes 12-bit RAW. The thing is it's limited to recording that out. So you're gonna need to record to an SSD. And if you're gonna record to an SSD, you're gonna need a way to attach it, which means you're gonna need to rig out this camera, which is totally fine, and I've done that. That being said, it's just an extra step and an extra hassle. So I will say that only having SD cards for the dual card slot on the S52X is a bit disappointing now that the Z6iii came out and it's able to record raw footage to that CF Express B card. So just to do a direct comparison between these two cameras at their highest settings, so again, 6K 60 and RAW versus 6K 3420 10-bit, and you can see that on the left here, the depth of the Nikon footage is just much more than the depth on the LUMIX footage. The LUMIX footage still looks great, in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with what the LUMIX is producing at all, but when you look at it side by side, it's really hard to say that the Nikon doesn't look better. It really does. Now, when I was filming these horses, one of the things that I immediately noticed was just how good the stabilization is on the LUMIX S52X, and that also extends to my LUMIX S9, which is filming me right now. I just love the stabilization out of these cameras. I feel almost too carefree when I'm using these. Like, I can get away with almost anything. In fact, I'm hand holding this footage right here, and you can see it looks pretty good, but even still there's a little bit of wobble because I'm trying a shot that I really shouldn't be trying to get. But there's something really, really pleasing about the stabilization with this camera. It can look a little too floaty at times, a little too lightweight, and if you don't like that look, then maybe don't snag this camera. But if you're just a run and gun trying to get things, especially in the social media content creation space, it's really hard to argue with how good the stabilization is in the LUMIX cameras right now. When it comes to the Z6iii, I would say that the stabilization is very acceptable. If I play this clip for you guys right here, you can notice that you can really see my hand jiggles a bit extra in this clip. And I wasn't being too overly cautious. I was just kind of, filming a horse in the distance with my Nikon camera. You could totally remove that, so maybe it's a moot point, but I'm just letting you know that that's the experience I had. That being said, if you really hone in and you hold your breath, you can get stable footage. So right here, I'm filming this horse that's walking by, and it was happening relatively quickly, and you can see that the footage looks plenty stable. Now, both of these cameras are in that 6K camera market, and this is my favorite market right now. I think 4K is being kind of phased out, or at least to me it feels like it, and these 6K cameras are coming into play. Now, why 6K? Is it just because we like more resolution? Yeah, kind of, I guess, but it's more specific than that, and that's where I think LUMIX is kind of stealing the show, and something that I didn't even show here. It's an open gate sensor. Why is open gate important? Well, open gate is specifically important because a lot of content that we're filming these days, unfortunately, is being utilized for both horizontal content and vertical content. The ability to get extra footage at the top and bottom of your frame is just extremely valuable for multi-purpose content. I don't really understand why the Z6iii isn't allowing me to film in open gate. I think that was a little bit of a miss, if you ask me. Additionally, being a 6K open gate sensor, that's going to make filming with anamorphic glass much more convenient because your footage gets stretched out, and if you're shooting not open gate, you lose a lot of the top and bottom. It's extremely wide, whereas when you do film in open gate, you get just a little bit extra, and it makes those anamorphic clips just that much more appealing. Unfortunately, when you are filming in open gate, as I've said before, it's only 420, so that's definitely a downside with the S52X compared to the LUMIX. But I don't know, the fact that it doesn't give you open gate or any anamorphic support in this camera is definitely a bit of a disappointment. And honestly, I feel like if LUMIX would just give us those few extra features, this camera would steal the show, because this is $2,500. It's sitting in a beautiful, perfect market. This camera, when it came out, we all raved about it because it was $2,200. So it was like, okay, it's 420, but it's $2,200 and it gives you a 6K open gate sensor. So totally worth it. And now I think it's even right around $2,000, maybe a little cheaper these days. So this is still a great value camera if you're gonna be doing a lot of anamorphic content. And that's kind of one of my things with this camera. It's like almost perfect is basically how I would describe the Z6iii. It's almost perfect. They're just missing those few features that we want, or at least that I want, that are kind of holding me back from saying that this is the ultimate kind of budget, intermediate, professional, beginner film camera hybrid. It kind of does it all. So even though this camera offers better, more high quality footage, as you saw, it looks absolutely fabulous, I think that the S52X is just a little bit more useful in today's social media content creation world. That being said, if we're gonna talk about something that far and away exceeds my LUMIX S52X when it comes to the Z6 Mark III, that's going to be the photography experience. I really, for some reason, don't like shooting photos on my S52X. This is pretty strictly a video camera for me. What's weird about that is that it shares the exact same sensor as the S9, which is filming me right now, and I love shooting photos on my S9. So I don't know if I could really tell you why. Maybe it's the form factor. There's something about it that just for photography, it just doesn't really jive with me. Whereas with the Nikon Z6 Mark III, this is an absolute workhorse when it comes to photography. Now they're both 24.5.1 megapixel sensors somewhere, give or take around there. So the photos are going to be fairly comparable. It's almost going to be more dependent on what glass you're using, but the actual user experience and the grip and the feel, far and away, I prefer the Nikon Z6 III for photography. How's this tracking me? Is this doing a good job? Looks like it. And this, hey, how we doing? Anyways, guys, this was almost more for my own curiosity, a kind of more casual video. I was like, I have the Nikon Z6 III rented. I love my LUMIX S52X. They're both 6K sensors. They're both hybrid cameras. I just wanted to put them side by side and see, is the raw footage really that much better? And to be honest, I think it is. And if you're looking at a camera in today's market and you're looking for the absolute highest quality settings and you're on a bit of a budget, it's hard to argue with the Nikon Z6 Mark III. That being said, if you're doing mostly content creation and you need open gate to be able to have variety with your footage, being able to go from vertical to horizontal content or vice versa, it's hard to argue with the LUMIX S52X. So I think this is going to be use case specific as to which one is better. For me, I don't really film with raw footage very much at all. So that, while being cool, is not a big deal to me. I've been kind of filming with more anamorphic lenses lately. I do social media content on both Instagram and YouTube. So this is a much more practical camera for me. And again, it's pretty affordable right now, being around $2,000. I almost could see a world where these are the two cameras that you own. And if you're doing more high-end stuff, you can take the Z6 with the raw footage, but then if you're doing anything else or anamorphic, maybe give the S52X a shot. I hope that you all enjoyed just kind of this little camera discussion. If there's anything else you want me to talk about in relation to Nikon cameras or LUMIX cameras, definitely let me know down below in the comments. I really appreciate the conversation. Even if some of you all Nikon people take my small criticism as me saying I hate Nikon as a whole. I don't. Nikon's great. I love my ZF. Chill out. Thank you so much to Hohem for sponsoring this video. I really do enjoy their iSteady M7 phone gimbal. Again, one of the most versatile phone gimbals I've ever used. So if you want to check them out, definitely click the link down below in the description as well. I think they're running a discount right now, so it's kind of the best time to pick one up if that's something you need. I hope that you all enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.